A game should be either one of two things: fun to play or challenging. Or both. Being fun to play is definitely not something I would associate with Dark Souls. But in a market saturated with games that you can just basically walk through, Dark Souls was a breath of fresh air when it first came out. In fact, I would put it down as the best game in 2011, and would more than likely feature on a top 10 games of all time for the Xbox 360 list. Before I decided to buy Dark Souls, I kept hearing that it was an old school RPG game. When exactly did it become acceptable to call a challenging game old school? In most modern games, despite whatever genre it might be, you are hard to kill compared to the enemies you're fighting, or else checkpoints are such that death bears no consequence. Neither of these luxuries are true in Dark Souls. It's a sad state of affairs, but having unforgiving game mechanics is now the only criteria you need to be classed as an old school game. It might even be the case that there are less gamers that want to play challenging games, and that's why there are now fewer made. Which is easy to understand because people play these games to escape from the challenges of their everyday life, so why should they have to face even more while playing a game? There are some people, however, myself included, who actually need challenge, not just in games but even in everyday life. I grow bored very quickly unless there's some kind of challenge or goal to aim for. Even if I do die over and over again playing Dark Souls, that's fine because it just makes it even more of a challenge. Do I hate myself? Not really. Only sometimes. In this video I hope to sum up what Dark Souls is really all about. So let's get started on what to expect when you first play Dark Souls 1. Well, to begin with, you'll get the synonymous character selection screen that you get in pretty much every RPG game. And something that's just come to my attention is that the music in this little part reminds me of like a Resident Evil 2 save room or something. So you start off in the undead asylum in a prison cell, and luckily you manage to get out. You start out as an undead at this point, and there is very little story to speak of. You get a few lines of text, the game starts, you manage to get the key to your cage or your cell, and that's it. You just start. There's no grand story, there's no like 30 minutes of cutscenes or anything like that, which other games of this type would have, which for me again is another breath of fresh air. I've talked many times about how I am not a fan of stories in games, particularly in first person shooter games. I don't think they have a place for a story. Any time spent on a story is wasted time, I'm afraid. When you're designing a game, I think it should be all about the gameplay. I just want to play the game. I don't want to sit through a lot of story. It doesn't interest me. That's not to say though that Dark Souls doesn't have a deep and rich story. It's just that you don't have to be exposed to it and you don't have to follow it, which I didn't playing for the first time. And I don't generally when I play any game, I just play the game. And it's pretty much unheard of in my experience to come across a role-playing game which has the story has such a small part to play in the overall gameplay experience. Actually, that sounds really bad. It sounds as if Dark Souls has no substance, which isn't true at all. What I really mean is that it does have a story, but it doesn't constantly ram it down your throat. Instead, it just lets you discover the world and the story through playing the game and meeting different bosses and going to different locations, which is a much more organic way of telling a story really, rather than just sitting there watching it. I mean, after all, you're playing a game, so you shouldn't have to just watch what's happening. So right at the start you already meet one of the, well, I think anyway, one of the hardest bosses in the game, and you're equipped with only a broken sword, which is a message in itself. Just letting the player know that there will be some things in the game that you just won't be able to do right away. and it's best to just leave this boss until a later time. Something that is of course not automatically obvious. You just kind of have to figure it out for yourself. And the one thing I noticed when I first played this game was that it didn't feel natural to attack a boss or any enemy this size just head on like this. Normally in games you'll have some kind of range weapon or something like that, but in Dark Souls invariably you are just running up and just hitting something that's easily over 10 times your size. And that's the thing about the Dark Souls world. Everything's 10 times bigger than it is in our world. And I do mean everything. This giant bird drops you into this awful world. This awful world where everything's trying to kill you. With little to no instruction. All you'll find is a couple of NPCs who don't give you any directions. From here the road forks off in 3 ways. There's a simple test to know whether or not you're on the right path in Dark Souls. Ask yourself one question: can I kill the enemies I'm fighting? And if the answer to that is no, then you're probably not on the right path. Or you should at least try and find an alternative route. The Dark Souls world seems pretty similar to our own, except things are obscure. Basically what they've done is they've taken our world and just made parts of it really big. And what it does is it makes you feel like the world you're playing in is much bigger than you are, and that you have a really small part to play in a much more interesting world, and you're just there as an onlooker or someone that's coming into this world just to make your way through it more than make a name for yourself. I'm really sick of hearing the expression "the chosen one" in games and movies. It seems to me that ever since the Matrix, all games and movies have been based around the chosen one lead character that is somehow different or special to the other members of the game or film, as it might be. The mention of fate or destiny seems to be thrown around quite a lot too. We like to think of ourselves as special, that the world revolves around us, or in fact that the universe was made for us. I can't tell you how arrogant that actually is, but this is something that the people that make movies and games are aware of. Although Dark Souls is guilty of this too, the game calls you the chosen undead. You in no way feel special when playing it. The game repeatedly reminds you of this when it kills you over and over again, by the most minor of characters. I think there's something more special about being the underdog in an extraordinary world, rather than being an extraordinary person in an average world. Although your character doesn't feel special, you do have the ability to make an impact on your world, and it's something that's really lacking in a lot of games. This is something that Blade Runner 07 posted on Golden Age Gaming when identifying potential faults with Grand Theft Auto 5. Which, before he mentioned it, I didn't really think about the importance of that in a game. The complete opposite can be found in Dark Souls, however. The only way to progress in Dark Souls is by opening up shortcuts and killing key enemies and bosses which don't respawn. The level design in Dark Souls is genius. Usually what you'll find is when you make your way to a new area, you'll make your way through the entire area for probably as much as 2 hours worth of gameplay per dungeon, at the end of which there'll be a boss, and after fighting him you'll usually return to where you started via a shortcut. But it never feels cheap, it always feels like a legitimate reason why you had to go the whole way out round and fight a boss. And again, because Dark Souls is more about the challenge and actually doing something rather than the fun of doing it, when you do actually open up that shortcut, it feels really satisfying because you then know that you don't have to run the whole way out round for 10 minutes to get to a new place. You can just, say for example, climb up a ladder or go through a new door you've just opened. The more and more you open up of these shortcuts, the smaller the Dark Souls world gets, and the better you get at playing it, or at least navigating it. I keep making reference to the fact that Dark Souls is a difficult game, but I haven't really went into detail on what makes it so difficult. So I'm going to end this video with a list of everything that makes Dark Souls a challenging game. Enemies respawn in a very unique way in Dark Souls. It happens when you save at a bonfire, which means that the player is in control of when they actually respawn. In the grand scheme of things, this can actually be used to your advantage for farming souls or humanity or rare items, but in the short term and for practical reasons, like getting from level A to level B, it means you can't relax. You must always be on your guard when travelling through the Dark Souls world, because there will always be some kind of threat. In Dark Souls 2 they removed this feature. After a while the enemies stop spawning, which I'll go into a little more detail in a Dark Souls 2 video. Instant death. Any enemy can kill you at any time in the game. It doesn't matter what kind of badass character you've ranked up. If you drop your guard or your timing's a little off, even the first enemies in the game can kill you. Which might sound a little harsh, but when it does happen you know that it's your fault because maybe you should have kept your shield up or took health at a different time. There's an interesting counterbalance with the health. Health in the game comes in the forms of Estus flasks. You start off with 5 and you later can build up to 10 or 15. The only way to replenish said flasks is to save at the bonfire, which in turn refreshes the area and causes all the enemies to spawn back. So there's a catch-22 going on. Let's say you battle your way through an entire level, killing all the enemies, only to make it outside the boss door having only 2 to 3 Estus flasks left. You have two options. You can fight the boss with fewer flasks, or you can go back to the bonfire, save and replenish your flasks, which of course respawns the enemies in the level, meaning you're back to square one. As I mentioned before though, some enemies don't respawn and some shortcuts can be opened, which makes things a little bit easier. The penalty for death in the game can be very high. You lose all of your souls and have one chance to retrieve them. The only way to get back your souls is to go back to the place where you died. Sounds easy, right? Wrong. Generally what happens is you panic and rush your way through the level to try and get your souls back, and that's the worst thing to do in a Dark Souls game. You need to keep your shield up and always be on your guard. Trying to rush or run through the level won't get you very far. Usually it just gets you swamped by enemies. This can be probably one of the most frustrating things with Dark Souls, especially if you lose a lot of souls. Littered throughout the Dark Souls world are pitfalls and traps. Some of the enemies are even disguised as chests, so what you thought was a reward is actually instant death. The final point I'll make is that you need to have some level of skill to complete and play a Dark Souls game. Most enemies require some kind of strategy to kill them. It's not just a case of hammering the attack button, you'll need to at least defend or somehow avoid their attack. In some games your shield is used for decoration only, or only gets used at specific times or specific enemies. If you play Dark Souls the way you play the Legend of Zelda game, you're gonna die really quick. In Dark Souls your shield is as important as the weapons you carry. It certainly gets used just as much. I think that covers most of the main points in difficulty. Individually they might not sound very unique or problematic, but when you add them all together it can become quite a punishing game. In my next video I'm going to look at Dark Souls 2 and see how many of the features from Dark Souls 1 carried over. Thanks for watching and subscribe for the next video.